We must dare to be different. In the year 1776, when the 13 colonies of North America decided to chart a new path for themselves and future generations, they declared the following: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness." They went on to further declare, and this is the interest of my reference, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. Over the past 60 years, there has been an attempt to drive the point home that Africa, as imagined by European colonialists, is in a fixed form or state. During the decolonization period, it was emphasized to our founding fathers that attempts to remake Africa would lead to more problems than it would solve. This was the lie that was sold to our forebearers to convince them to maintain the colonial borders. Today, we have the benefit of hindsight, and it is obvious that this premise was at best misleading or worse, a lie. The exiting powers wanted Africa to maintain its form because it had been designed and optimized for their exploitation and benefit, not ours. This raises the question: what other premise are we operating on that is founded on similarly shaky assumptions? I keep reiterating that we, a generation of young Africans, find ourselves in a unique position. We possess all we need to remake our society in the most beneficial of ways. But we are also primed to reinforce a bad system and subject the next 2 or 3 generations of Africans to this unending cycle we find ourselves in. It is my informed opinion that we should choose the former. In order for us to begin the process of reshaping our future, we need to address these 3 issues. First, we must free ourselves from the shackles of our past. Colonial rule existed in Africa for less than a century. However, it is upon this limited yet somehow significant period that most of our current reality was imagined or instituted. This is a shackle we must free ourselves from. The colonial framework on which our societies are based was instituted to extract our resources and labor for the benefit of all but us. Until we change this underlying mechanism, our societies will continue to fail to deliver the much needed economic, social, and political freedom we require. Please note that I am not suggesting that we get bogged down in our history. No, I am only asking that we take from our history that which does not belong to it. After dealing with our questionable beginnings, the second thing we must address is our present. While it would be easy to want to blame all our current predicaments on our troublesome beginning, that would not entirely be accurate. Most of our modern problems can be traced to the way we run our societies and the people we have entrusted to run our institutions. In our midst, there are men and women who get up every day and elect to engage in actions that leave us the more poorer. Individuals who stand guard and in most cases help as our resources are looted. People whose greed make them believe it is okay to let billions of our collective resources be shipped to other societies in exchange for trinkets given to them and their cronies. These are the same people who take resources meant for public goods and services and redirect such funds to their personal matters. This need for accumulation is driven by a need to quench a thirst that seems unquenchable from a casual observer. It is these same individuals who consciously choose to erect barriers, both economic and legal, to make it harder for the ordinary African to survive, let alone allowing them to carve out a piece of our homeland for their benefit. These are the men and women who have bought into the colonial trope that we as a people are undeserving of what is good, and that aspiring to a better quality of life is an African, that such thoughts and hopes are the preserve of others. Sadly, these fellow Africans have not only bought into this lie, but they have also gone ahead to make decisive steps that ensure these baseless assumptions continue to assume the shape of truth. It is these people that fill the rank and file of our public service and have gone ahead to put tiers on these services. Common services are rendered to different people based on backward reasoning that places race as the primary consideration, wealth as secondary consideration, and corruption, what we have normalized as connections, as tertiary consideration. The African masses continue to get the short end of these services while paying the highest charge for them. Closely associated with this group is the cadre of African businessmen. These individuals commit to take up public goods and service provisioning duties, and then underdeliver or completely refuse to deliver that which they committed to deliver. Concerningly, it is these people, not our teachers, not our nurses, not our doctors, not our dedicated civil servants, that get paid first for their services. This group is closely related to their kith and kin who work in the private sector. Men and women who cut every corner, bend every law, and deliver substandard or wanting goods and services to the African. And in true kinship to their other colleagues, these private actors too demand prompt payment for their sweat. Collectively, these men and women and their insatiable greed are responsible for our collective misery. And for their deeds, this group of Africans must be brought to account. The day of reckoning for these individuals is long overdue, and we have a duty to ourselves and to those who came before us to ensure that men and women responsible for the pain and suffering in Africa have their day in the sun. Gone are the days when we let men and women whose actions have led to generational poverty, trauma, or suffering go quietly into the sunset. Or worse off, let them be, in some unfounded hope of a divine force evening the score for our suffering. There will be accountability, and we must be brave enough to be the ones to call these members of our societies to book. The third and most important issue we need to address is with regards to our future. We must take the necessary steps needed to make the future we want. As a people, we have been accused of having our whole lives governed by superstition. We have continued to abrogate important decisions with real-life consequences to ghosts, spirits, deities, and the divine. Folks, it's 2024. You only get what you work for. Anyone telling you different is lying. As a collective, we can no longer delegate consequential decisions of our lives. We must take an active role in planning, designing, actualizing, and evaluating the facets of the future we want. This means that we must divorce ourselves from the belief that we can believe or pray ourselves into or out of individual or collective realities. Anything we want, we must do. As such, our public discourse must be one of ideas, nothing more. Ideas must be our only collective religion. We do not have the leeway to entertain other forms of divine. I am a firm believer that people, when presented with the right information, will ultimately come to similar or related conclusions. The path to how we achieve a certain goal may differ, but the destination will mirror each other. This is because, at our most basic, we all want the same thing: to lead fulfilling and dignified lives. In this realization, We as a generation must divorce our thoughts and investments from any idea that does not have our collective interests at heart. And it is based on this change in thought that we must also enlist the men and women who we will oblige to shape our collective vision. Our only consideration should be how well a proposed idea helps us achieve our desired outcome. I will not stop reminding you. We are late. The world is decades ahead of us. Today, technology provides us with mechanisms and tools to catch up with, if not surpass, the world. But also equally true is the fact that that same technology gives the world the tools needed to compound our current economic gap. It all depends on what we elect to do as a generation. We must also remember that the current failing of the men and women who occupy positions of power and influence has nothing to do with us. There is always this attempt to make it appear like the inability of our policymakers and our elites to plan our society effectively is evident of some inherent deficiency within the African. It is a continuation of a trope imagined by Europeans to justify the uneven-handedness and brutality meted on our ancestors. To them, we are incompetent, unorganized, undeserving, okay with mediocrity, and any other trope that makes smaller men believe themselves to be more than they are. But none of these descriptions points to what we are. It is our current leaders who have failed. We have not. Their failures are not our collective failure. Their inability to imagine and organize speak to their individual deficiencies. We must refuse to be sold the lie that we cannot change because the people in charge of our societies have refused to change. Importantly, we must reject the assumption that we are not aware of our problems and the policies and actions needed to solve them. As a civilization, we are still young. We have overcome extreme odds to be where we are today. But this does not exempt us from the failing of the generation currently in charge of our affairs. This is the one failing we need to overcome. We must succeed in remaking our society. Our lives literally depend on it. But that is not all. We do this right, and we free those who came before us from the shame of compounded failure unfairly charged on them by history. We also free future generations. We free them to dream. We free them to experiment. We free them to hope. We free them to invent. But most of all, we free them to live, and to do so in dignity and prosperity. We often say to ourselves and to each other that we can be whoever or whatever we want. But this is not entirely true. To be African is to have your dreams limited, or to be forced to move to societies that have created a worldview large enough to accommodate the millions of transcendent dreams that litter our continent. But no more. We have in our hands the opportunity to right the ship for the Africans of tomorrow. Our die is cast. Whatever path we choose to take, our success as a people will only come through hard work. There is no way around it. The question we must answer is whether we want to pass the buck to our children, or do the work ourselves and hand our children a better chance at life than we got. This is the value of society. Each generation leaving things a bit better than they found them for those coming after. May we as a generation leave Africa a far much better place than we found it. This has been envisioningafrica.com, and I have been your host Wang. I hope to see you here next time.